silver they got in Potosí with the English and with the British people and the Portuguese. Until in 1776 there was a foundation of a viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata that included the territory that nowadays is Uruguay, Bolivia, Paraguay and Argentina, and Buenos Aires was declared its capital because of the port. Actually that's why we are called porteños, because of the in Buenos Aires, because we are a city, a port city. On this avenue we're going through, it's called 9th of July Avenue, 9 de Julio actually in Spanish. It's our one of our two national dates, as you can see. It's the Columbus Theater, which now it's like a corner, it's not the main entrance. This is a symbol of how eclectic this city is, because the architecture is very particular. It was built by an Italian architect called Meano, and as January is a vacation month, they have closed it for restoration work. So it's a pity, because the guided visitation is very interesting. But at least I wanted to show you from here, because the entrance, it is very big. Actually, that's the difference. This was opened in the late 19th century, and this is a moment when Buenos Aires, Argentina as a country, started to be a little bit more wealthy. So they could afford this kind of construction, and mostly they could afford to buy the projects of foreign architects to build this kind of things. So the main room can hold 3,000 people, so that's different from the Milan Opera or the opera in Paris, because the idea is that here they wanted to build everything big, because America is a big continent, you have space. So the hall is very beautiful, but mostly, at least to me, the most interesting thing is the acoustic. The acoustic is incredible. You hear, I mean, if you're in what we call the paradise, which is the last part of where students go, you hear even better than if you are on the first floor, so it's amazing. So this is the entrance, the main entrance, actually.
What happened in 9th of July?
Excuse me? Now I'll tell you about it, but before we pass by, in front we have the Palace of Justice, which was also a piece of work of Meano's. So this is a mixture, because it has this kind of neoclassical thing related with the columns, but also the roof from here, and if you get to see it, is a little bit French. So we had a mixture of styles in our architectonical treasure in Buenos Aires. Okay. Hold on. Actually, this architect has three pieces of work. This one, the Colón Theater, and the most important high school we have in Buenos Aires, that maybe you'll pass by when you do the other south, which is very, very interesting. So, well, you were asking me about the 9th of July, but the thing is, before the 9th of July, we have this foundation of the Viceroyalty of the Rio de la Plata in 1776, and this is the moment when Buenos Aires started to grow, although it remained being small, because it was a poor city. Houses were made on adobe. Adobe is like it's like a straw and wood material that makes constructions not to last long. So that's why, in difference with Mexico or Lima, we don't have a very important colonial heritage. I don't know if this is your first time in Latin America?
Yes.
Okay. Well, Buenos Aires is not the most example. I mean, it's different from the rest of Latin American countries, but it has many elements in common because it was a Spanish colony. So the thing is, in 1810, the revolution with Spain began. So the revolution war lasted for 10 years, from the 1810 to the 1820. In the 1816, there was we sworn the independence. Actually, we sworn the flag. So it was the 9th of July of 1816. So that's why he was asking me about the 9th of July. That's the date in which we sworn our flag. This avenue is called Corrientes. Corrientes actually it's a province. You know that Buenos Aires has the capital and the provinces. One of the provinces is called Corrientes. This is a very famous avenue because we have all the main theaters. Actually, not in aristocratic. It's like it was very important during the 60s with all the influence we have with communist ideas and all this kind of very left ideological youth that was here in the 60s and 70s. Well, this avenue was very important. It has very important libraries, so it has a history in that term. So now we are facing the highlight. This obelisk actually was erected in the year 1936 to commemorate the first foundation of the city of Buenos Aires. And actually this the Avenue 9th of July, it is, as we are always showing off the porteños, we say it is the widest in the world. I don't think it is the widest, but the thing is thousands of buildings were demolished to build it. And this diagonal, which is one of the only two diagonals we have in town, is an exception. It's called the North Diagonal, or Diagonal Roque San Peña, right? And if you check, the buildings are very different, very eclectic, and also they all have the same height, which is an exception for Buenos Aires. The politic place. Every time someone has to claim something to the government, even from the revolution properly started in Plaza de Mayo until now, we come to this area. So that's why we start always the circuit in May Square.
Más que te enseñé el libro, tanto me toca non so mai che video lo deve
Yes. ¿Se de acá o no? ¿Y cuánto tiempo? Sí. Te digo para calcular cuánto tiempo tengo acá. O sea que tengo 20 minutos en la plaza, ¿no? Okay, so I'm going down.
Like you, when you sit down.
What does this actually, Eleanor?
The big house is the presidential palace.
And the statue here? The statue?
Wait, I'll tell you everything.
Το προεδρικό παλάτι.
No, because if I don't tell you in order, something for me to remember.
Εγώ παίρνω σημαίακι, παιδιά.
Ναι.
Παίρνω σημαίακι να το βάλω στην τσάντα μου.
Okay. This is the best place in terms of view of the whole central square, okay? So actually this is North Diagonal, the place through we entered, okay? In the back you can see the obelisk. But first of all, I want you to have a look of the whole square and notice that all buildings are different from each other. Okay? Are very different. This is not typical in the rest of the main central squares. The architecture is much more similar. This has to do with the eclecticism Buenos Aires has. Okay? So the idea is that you have in mind that you have three elements in common in all main central square in the Hispanic American towns. You have the Palace of Government, where the Viceroyalty worked, now the President. You have the Cabildo, which is the city hall, the place where the local power of the city laid, okay? And finally, the cathedral, which is a Catholic power and where the Catholic Church has its power. So these three elements, you will always find them, okay? Now this doesn't look very much as a church. Actually, this neoclassical entrance was set up later on, after the revolution against Spain. Actually, if you see the dome, you will see that the dome is still colonial, okay? And the back part as well. So the idea is that this in the beginning had two very big towers in front, like the typical Spanish churches. And what happened is that after the revolution that started here in the 1810, we had, as the same thing happened in France, they started looking for the Roman Republic symbols like the columns. So that's why we have this neoclassical entrance from the 1822, but actually is from the 17th century, okay? And also the Cabildo, it is very, very old, it's been restored several times, and now it's the museum. Now in front you will see this French palace, which is from the 1890s, that it is where the mayor works, the government of the city. So for you to have an idea, Buenos Aires was a very poor city until in the 1890s, when Europe was in process of industrialization. We started to export meat and corn and other raw materials to the European countries. So at this moment they started to make a redesign of the urban pattern following the French kind of architecture. So that's why you will see, especially in the area next to the hotel, a very French influence, okay? So you were asking me, who asked me about the business called May Pyramid, Pirámide de Mayo. It was the first monument held in Buenos Aires from the 1811. So it was a year after the revolution began in the 1810, when the neighbors gathered here and decided to begin the revolution. And actually it was a gift the community made to itself to commemorate the beginning of the revolution. Okay? So one thing that happened when Buenos Aires became a richest city was through, when they decided to redesign the urban pattern, they started opening avenues and diagonals and palaces. So the first avenue they've opened is this one in front of us, which is May Avenue, the one with the trees. It is very antique. It is very similar to some places in Madrid, and it is from the 1894. And the other two are these two diagonals, the north diagonal and the south diagonal. Okay, so the idea is that this square divides town between the south and the north. These are the two exceptions. Okay. Actually, what happened is that they were very much influenced by the Baron of Haussmann, who was the person that redesigned Paris at the time, because Paris was still a very medieval. So the diagonals in Paris were thought for the armies of Napoleon III to arrive faster to catch the people. But they are very nice, so they just seem like a very not typical architectonic design. It has a political purpose. So I want to tell you a little bit about this. Well, before, the obelisk has an idea, has a Republican sense. It's pretty much like the one which is in Washington DC. The idea is to join the three Republican powers, okay? So in the back part of the obelisk is the Palace of Justice, which we pass by that we can see because of the obelisk. In the back of May Avenue there is the dome, the green dome of the Congress, the Palace of the legislative power. And here we have the executive power. So it's the Republican triangle. Okay, that's the idea.
So the parliament is over there?
No, the parliament is there.
Okay.
No, in the menu,
It's for the president, huh?
This is where the president works.
President, Parliament and Justice.
Right.
Άρα μεγάλο.
Τα πιάνει, βλέπω αμέσως. So these bands and these kerchiefs you see on the floor are related to our most sad and recent story, because this has to do with the last military government we had in the 20th century. We had several military governments, but the last one was the hardest and the one that made the country a bloody kingdom, as we say, because actually 30,000 people were killed, actually disappeared, we call them, because their bodies have never turned up. So what happened is that the last military government began in the 1976. That's our president.
Here?
He works here.
Yeah.
He's not now working, because when he's working now.
Having fun.
Yeah, I wish
Having fun.
Ah, that's a picture that you took.
Yes.
Here.
Okay, you saw.
But no bodyguards, no one, huh?
No,
just like that.
Free.
because he plays handball. He plays like his one.
He plays it. He isn't.
He isn't, of course not. Everyone, all politicians play like that, but it's okay. But did you like Calafate?
Yeah.
Okay.
We like the glacier.
Ushuaia was better.
So well, the idea is that this is the place where the mothers and grandmothers of the people that were starting to be kidnapped started gathering. So as they didn't know each other, they first used the diaper of the babies on the heads as a way to recognize themselves. And this remained as their symbol, and they soon gained international recognition, and this saved them from being killed by the military, because just to kill the kids was fine, but to kill the moms, it was like
It
too
was
much
too much.
for them. I think it's too much to kill
And
the kids.
of course, all the leftist people were disappeared.
Well, mostly people, mostly students.
Communists.
Yes, or not even, but usually people that were intellectuals.
Intellectuals.
Psychologists. I mean, you didn't have to be in the army. I mean, in the local guerrillas, we say, the group that were against the military. They killed 30,000 people. So it was a lot. So the idea is that these women started to seek information about their children, and the only thing they could do at the time, because it was a dictatorial government, is go around the square, because no protests or riots could took place here at the moment. So well, they still come all Thursday at 2 p.m. with no exception, and they go around to keep memory alive. And what they are doing now is trying to have their grandchildren back, because they kidnapped many girls who were pregnant. So they killed them after the babies were born, and they kept the babies for themselves or the families related to the military circle.
When was that?
That was 1966 to 1983. Also,
83.
very recent. Actually,
So
after
many
that-
years the coup.
Yes,
We
and-
had only 7
no,
years.
but before that we had 2 or 3 dictatorial governments as well. This one was the hardest. So the place we're going to visit, the palace, it's a military circle now. So they are, I won't say a word about the military. We're just looking at the architecture and looking about the French things, because actually that's the place where it's like the social club of the military. But the place as a palace is very interesting to see. So we'll go. I won't check the time because we have to be, although we have to be very punctual, it's fine. Because if we arrive late, it's a military circle, so they are just like, don't make anything that it wasn't on the schedule, because they just go out.
Ωραία είναι εδώ. Ναι, ναι.
Έχει βάλει δίκτυο προστασίας 37.
100 λεπτά.
We are talking about the sun, it's really hot.
Here especially because
What's your sun protection factor? No. What do you use?
I use 65 for the hair
65.
and 40 for the rest.
Okay, I used 8, so can you please stand on safe? I'm not darker than you, but
Αλλαγή έπρεπε να βάλουμε όλοι.
No. For a
Βάλε,
teenager,
βάλε.
I feel advised.
Λοιπόν, έχει κάτι
Μόνο εγώ δεν
τεράστια φαρμακεία που θα έχει μέσα παιδιά αντιλιακά, αντικουνουπικά.
Ό,τι θες, ναι,
Δηλαδή,
πάντα.
γωνία ολόκληρη. Πρέπει να πάμε. Oh, no, here.
Just for okay. First of all, this building is the National Bank. Amazing. This used to be the Colón Theater before the Colón was relocated there. Okay. So if you go inside, you can still see the dome. It's very interesting. A lot of people have resentments to this building because the architecture, it's called the gigantalism style, that is related to the phase system and phase system architecture that makes the human being feel small compared to the building. But although I think it's a very amazing building, so I try to separate. This one on the corner is our local FBI. It's what we call la CSIBE. Right? Here we have the, I always say the local IRS, the Income and Output Taxes Office, and Ministry of Economy. So if you compare the buildings economics, and the size of the bodies of justice of executive power, you will have an idea of what rules Argentina. It's either economy or politics. I think it's economy. So take the pink house. The pink house is a very antique building actually. First, in the beginning, you had this kind of board front, like drawing from colonial times. Okay, the sea was just in the back part. Now they are pushing the river. They are gaining earth to the river. They are pushing the coast 2 or 3 kilometers to the back. So if you take, you have a careful look, you will see that the building is not symmetrical. You have columns on the one side, built on the other one. You have a right extreme, which is shorter because it's been demolished to build this avenue. So actually this building was separated. In the beginning you had the Central Coast Office and the Palace of Government, and in the late 19th century they joined it with this arch. Okay, so then it became properly the Palace of Government. Now a lot of people ask why this pink house is pink. Actually there are two current stories. One says that after the revolution after Spain, in the 1820, from the 1820 to the 1870s, we have a very hard civil war in Buenos Aires, either to decide if we were going to be a federalist country as the US or a centralist country as France. So as the wars were over in the 1870 and the building was finished in that moment, and the federalists were red and the centralists were white, it may be a symbol of a mixture.
A mixture.
It's not true. It was pink because at the time in Paris all houses were painted either in pink or in white. What is important is that pink in the beginning was made with a mixture of lime, which is like a white mud, with the blood of the cow. Okay? And also from here I want to see the balcony. You see the balcony over there? The one that is coming out? This is where Perón and Eva popularized the practice of greeting the people from there. Okay? So here's Eva and this is Perón from this one in between. Okay? And this is a this is the square. Yeah, Peronist manifestation. Okay? Okay. So we're going right away from the and don't worry. Visit the past palace. Actually, all these people that moved in the late 19th century had their mansions in the south part in town. So you will see it in the other south tour tomorrow. Maybe you'll visit some of the conventillos where the old mansions abandoned by these wealthy people that were slowly taken by the immigrants before some of them could buy their own small houses. So you will see that the palaces in this area are very, very fast growth in the north part of town, and actually much more than the ones they had in the south, because what happened is Argentina started to grow economically. There was a very conservative period in politics, so a very few people just kept all the money that was entering the country because of the exportation. The immigrants were arriving and they were living in a very low condition, and they want to have a social differentiation, so they started building very impressive palaces, mostly following the style of the French academicism, which is very classical. You will see it now.
Is January the peak of the vacation season, or is it on February?
No, mostly people live in January. It's January and February, but I think Buenos Aires is more empty in January than in February.
When does the school start?
School starts, schools, not college, in maybe middle February.
Middle February
until July. They have two weeks of break, and then they recommence until December, and then from December.
Why? What was that?
There is always someone doing
protesting.
Yes, always, for a small issue or a big issue. That's why this is always always been, and will always be the center, the politics center of town. That French building to the left is the Central Coast Office that before it used to be also in the Pink House. So when they had the money to hire these kind of French, very important architects and build these huge places, they relocated. And this one in front is the Ministry of Defense, which is very big also. Now, the river was all in this area. So all this area is earth. Okay.
Do they raise the flag each day or it stays up? The flag, the big flag in the center. Do they raise it and lower it or it stays up there?
It stays up always. Actually, kind of new. It has 3 years. No, this is a statue that actually is the gift that Italy gave for the centennial. Yes, for the centennial of the revolution, because 100 years after the revolution began in the 1910, because the revolution began in the 1810, each country gave a gift for the first centennial of the revolution. So the one from Italy was this one, Colón.
From Spain, I suppose, no gift.
No, there was the main, you know why? Because although we have a rejection of all the, that's why what happened in the cathedral, that they set up that neoclassical entrance, there was a rejection of all Spanish monarchical elements, but 100 years later there was a reconciliation with the Spanish roots. So actually the gift from the Spaniards is the most impressive of all. I will show it to you when we are having practice. The most impressive, yes. Actually it was put in the best privileged panoramical view in town. This avenue we're going through is called Paseo Colón. Okay, or
Έχει πολύ ωραία το τέρατσο του ξενοδοχείου μας. Μπορείς να βγεις από την έξοδο κινδύνου.
So the area of the hotel is a border between the financial district ending there and the place where the residential area begins. We are very close to Square San Martin now, 2 or 3 blocks. He was a very important general that fought during the independence war in the area of Andes, so he also led to free Chile and Peru. So he's a very important hero for Latin American countries. He's buried, actually his mausoleum is inside the cathedral, but not in the main entrance to the right, because they say he was a Mason, he wasn't Catholic. But he's very important. Him and Belgrano, that was represented in front of the big house, are the 2 most important national heroes we have. Now all these buildings, modern buildings, to your right is the new corporative district of Buenos Aires. It's called Catalinas Norte or North Catalinas, and it is that all corporative companies have their offices here. You have IBM, Microsoft, the embassies, the office of the Embassy of Japan. It's all concentrated here.
Yeah, IBM design.
Still is now. Some of the rooms are rented for parties, but the thing is, well, we have to be like completely divide the thing from what's the palace and what's the place meant to be. Okay.
It was built for the army.
No. Es el que está del otro lado, así que no vamos a poder salir por acá. Si quieres déjame acá y espérame. Fíjate cómo haces para retomar, porque ahí hay un estacionamiento. Déjame acá y vos esperame en la puerta del círculo, aunque hay un... ¿Lo ubicaste cuál es?
Popos.
Comedor de...
Μπα, δεν βλέπω το θυμοποίηση.
Sì.
Πού είναι οι άλλοι ρε? no.
Well, for a family, just yes, for the kids to play.
All we are seeing now is for the social life. Then we are going to see upstairs
Yes.
when they have.
This is very typical of the French construction that you have the first plan that is related to the social life of the family. And the first floor is going to the private life. Now you will see that the floor changed, but
Yes,
the
you can
rest is
see.
pretty similar.
The ceiling was not decorated.
What?
The ceiling was not decorated.
No, you are going to see another rooms that the ceiling are
decorated.
Ah.
Here no.
And that was the interior.
Άντε καλά.
And you can see in each door, you can see symbolism of Louis XIV.
Yes.
Yes.
Roi de Soleil.
So that's very, very French. And also you will see the eclecticism because this lamp, for instance, is very Chinese. See the alcohol was from China.
China?
Yes.
Αυτές οι λάμπες που βρήκαμε εγώ.
Ναι, ήταν κυριά παλιά μόνο.
Έπαιρνα κέρα.
Recorrido, sí.
Ωραία, πώς τη φαντάζεσαι. Και βγαίνει η Φλωρέντσια. Ξεπετάει και τη Φλωρέντσια. Έλα ρε παιδιά.
Well, you will still see here some restoration work. So
What's going on?
that's why we'll
First, we are going to see this corridor.
Ah, okay.
because
Yes.
It's very interesting. Each chair, well, the chair only for decoration. No one was,
available to see.
yes, wants to sit. And in each one, you have a different French
Monarch.
Represented.
in wood. So
Chairs.
the
Well,
chairs
the
have been
chair las vamos a ver en el otro comedor.
they
because-
are on the other right. I know
Yes,
because
and the chairs of this dining room are original.
Yeah,
I
so
think
they have to be.
We will see it in
kept.
another room.
This is still functional?
Yes.
Still.
Yes, the rooms are rented for
Rented for parties and everything.
parties,
So that's how-
Parties
dinners.
only to the military people.
No,
now they are
it's
the
open.
Anybody can
Yes.
rent. Nice.
How much?
How much? Who
I
knows?
We
don't know.
don't know, but what Alicia said the other day, the woman that makes the guided visitation, which is the longest one, she said that it is really affordable, that it's not that
It is
expensive.
affordable.
Which is, yes.
So we'll go here tonight.
Maybe we'll do a reservation.
And you can see the chandeliers are very different to the other one we have seen.
Yeah.
Iron.
Iron painted.
Like gold.
And the roof has the same treatment. Also, you will see the fleur de lis, which represents France. Also, the fireplace is very
Nice.
and you have two Greek goddesses there.
Diana and Jupiter.
On each side.
And two human faces.
Σου είναι πολλά.
That's why you notice the same style again, because we are
Yes,
coming back to this side.
this one was a room for music.
Has a very, very important acoustic. Actually has double doors to make the acoustic even better.
Τι πόρτες, δεν είναι ευθείες,
Ναι, κούρμπα.
They have a curve, yes.
Yes. And for the other place, you have two doors, not only one. Yes, one from this side and the other from
And the other one.
Mhm.
Yes, and if you lock the door, one is, I don't know how to say it. ¿Cómo se falsa?
Fake.
Fake?
Ah,
Fake dog?
So that εντάξει, αλλά το 40 τελείωσε. Είχαν.
Photo.
I can understand this problem, but the Petros why? I mean,
Why did you draw?
yes, why do you bring it from here?
First of all, they were not so quality. And the second thing, yes, first of all, technique, but even if they do them here, it wasn't the same thing for a family that was the very important social position. Even the doors are signed by people who made representative. It's much more elegant and much more impressive. The idea was that each room had to make an impression on the people that was visiting. But don't forget that this was all the visitation area.
Η αίθουσα υποδοχής,
But all the whole green thing was very slow, so they opened the convention without the paper strip.
What about furniture?
Furniture at the time, lo que hay, no se sabe mucho, no. Actually, it's not clear what happened when they sold it, but maybe they kept their own furniture.
Εδώ είναι η κυρίως είσοδος της Στρατιωτικής Ακαδημίας. Όλα τα καθάρματα, οι δικτάτορες έχουν περάσει από εδώ μέσα. Όλα τα καθάρματα έχουν μπει εδώ μέσα, ξέρεις, κανονικά να μην.
Φανάρι δεν έχει. Να μακρύνεις από πάνω.
Getting married.
They stayed in the palace.
So they stayed in the family in the palace. So after the crack, they sold it to the government, and this depends on the council offices of the government, which is now this new modern building. So this place is usually used for the diplomatic people when they come to stay in. So what they do when they come, the diplomatics, is go greet San Martin. San Martin is represented on his horse, and in the part of the basement you have it's a copy of a monument you have in Chile with the allegories and the idea of Louis XIV. So actually this is a copy of the one in Chile, and the one in Chile is a copy of the one in Versailles. Okay, but San Martin is being added on top. So usually when a diplomatic from anywhere in the world comes and stays here, he goes with a cape and says hello to the father of the nation, of course, always.
So he is the father of the nation.
He is. We don't have mothers of the nation, only fathers. That's the car there. I want to tell you about the story of this square. Maybe, I don't know if you have heard about it. Well, actually this used to be a place of a slave market for a while. Yes. For 30 years, because there was a treaty with the British government from the 1719 to the 1739. But I want to see a clip from here because it's very interesting. Yes, very much, especially at the time. Oh, remind me that he wanted to go to the bus before we leave, because maybe I think this area is better than Recoleta. He wants to change mine before we leave.
haven't seen many churches.
No, because we haven't been there. I mean, you see the churches when you go to the other south, because the church is next by to the central square, which were the first one, Santo Domingo, San Ignacio, and Francisco, three first Jesuit churches, and then some of them in the south area because there were very frequent flooding. So people couldn't get to the main square to get the religious service, so they started using them on the south. But now we will see one, which we believe, after we speak about the Cabana, which is this rationalist building we have next to the square, to the hotel, to the one. Well, there, I'll tell you about it now, and we will see a very aristocratic church on the back of a passage. And we will see another one in Metropolis. Here we have a shadow.
It's like a lunch break now because I can see many people around the park running picnic.
Oh yes, I mean, dog walkers. So from here, you have an idea of this cliff, natural cliff. The river used to be up to where the tower is now, okay, before they started gaining earth to the river. So first of all, in colonial times, this was just an empty space. So because of a treaty with the British government, an Utrecht Treaty, they decided to create a slave market for 30 years. So they used this square to trade the slaves. When that was forbidden, when the treaty was over, they decided to create a bulls running stadium like you have in Spain. So it was a very, very big one with octagonal shape and influence from the Moros in Spain. Very, very nice. But at a certain point, the bulls running was forbidden here. So they didn't demolish the whole building. What they did is use it as, we had two British invasions before the revolution against May in 1806 and 1807. So the Spaniards that were here defending with his sons and his grandchildren who were already criollos. Criollos is when they made the mixture between the Spanish people and the local people, the Indians. They used the stadium to make a small militia, we will say. And after the revolution against Spain that ended in 1820, we had the civil war between Federalists and Centralists. So they used the stadium as well to
Federalists
train Federalists and Centralists. The Federalists were the ones that wanted to have a federalist country as
like the US and those like in France.
So in the end, the Centralists won.
And they fought a civil war for this reason?
From the 1820 to the 1870. It was a very hard century. Imagine, we had from 1820 to 1820 revolution against Spain.
50 years war, civil war, for such an issue.
Yes, and finally the Centralists won. Because of the port, actually, we won. I mean, Buenos Aires won, unfortunately, because it's horrible for the country. Because of the port, they needed the port, so it was much more important than the rest of the country. So
the centralized people won.
Yes.
Buenos Aires.
So they demolished the building, and finally it started to be a little bit more. It was left abandoned for a while until the upper classes moved here. So this is the moment where they started seeding the trees and building these big mansions. Now, the park in front of us, it's called the British Men Square, and actually the tower is called the British Men Tower because it was the gift of the local British community for the centennial of the revolution, but not of the British government, because the king was dead at the time, so they couldn't participate in the festivities. So the local community decided to afford themselves the gift, so it was much more longer to construct it. And also because this is the British Square, because if you see, there is a very tiny, but in the back part of the trees, can you see the main arch? That is called the Retiro railway station.
Train station.
So this was like the entrance of town. This whole area was called El Retiro, that means retirement, because it is, in colonial times, it was a little bit apart from Major Square. So it was, here there was a local Spanish governor who lived here, so the idea is that it was called Retiro and it kept its name. But its factories and railways was a British investment, so that's why they constructed this and the square has their name. And not by chance we have a memorial, which is this semicircular thing in front of the flag that has the name of all the Argentinian soldiers that died on the Falklands War. You know, the Falklands were taken by the British in 1833. But during the last military government, in the end, in 1981, 1982, the government decided to try to get them back. Mad idea.
Mad idea.
Mad idea. And even what they did was terrible. They sent the professional army, which wasn't what an army, but they sent it to the Andes because Chile was allied with the UK. So they went there because they were afraid Chile may go across the Andes. And they sent the kids of 18-year-old that were doing to the Falklands without equipment.
Oh my God.
So now you see the boys without legs on the train every day asking for reinsertion into society, which they don't have. And the professional army was in the Andes, and the Chile knew about it, so they never crossed. But most people don't know that the official army really was in the Andes. It wasn't clear what happened. But the idea was to focus people on that, and if they won, well, military, and of course they didn't, so it was the end of the military as well. So it's not there by chance, it's in front of the
How many Argentinians died in Falklands?
Actually died, it's 600, but there are thousands of disabled people. Okay? Well,
And the Falklands are now in British occupation?
Yes, and the people there want to be British, so they don't want the people to have them back. It's better to have a British passport.
Than
We'll go check the Cabana and the Plaza Hotel and the church before we leave.
Βάλει λίγο τα παλικάρια, ρε μαλάκα.
Ναι.
The style is not uniform because it's German neo-baroque because you have the roof is kind of German, but the bow windows are German. So you have French, German, all mixed up. And actually, this belongs to a man, a French origin immigrant called Tornquist, that
Ernesto Tornquist,
that wanted to have a palace built for their visitors, for their friends coming from foreign countries. Yes.
We were in his countryside.
Okay, well they always have a countryside, a house in Mar del Plata, and a house maybe in Europe to spend half of the year. And 50 people working on the palace. Well, this was most
150.
Or 100, of course. Actually, do you know how many square meters has the Palacio Paz? 12,000 covered. So, the thing is...
So this was a house?
Actually, it was built to be a reception place for visitation.
Oh my God.
Okay. So, this building here shows the end of the following of the Parisian pattern. This is from the 30s, the same time we're in Chicago and New York, skyscrapers,
the Empire State Building.
Yes. So actually, this was for a long time the tallest building in South America made of reinforced concrete material.
Oh yeah?
And actually, a lot of people compare it with a ship. Actually, it is because Le Corbusier, that is a very important architect that was the creator of this rationalist style in architecture without ornamentation, just function, said that these kind of buildings were like ships, because the ships, as you had a trip to Europe, like 3 months were the first like machines to live in. So the idea is to create buildings that were machines to live in. And they say that as it's facing the river and you have a machine room which looks very much of the Titanic, they say it's like. But usually a lot of people, very traditional people, live here. The other day I found out that the person that was the teacher of my father, that was a very old psychiatrist with British origin, lived here with his mother. So these kind of people, yes.
Okay.
We don't know. And they said that then he married his nurse because his mother was about to die. That's an urban myth. But he was called Morgan. So I've heard many stories like that from people related either to the military or very important doctors with very high origin of immigration. And they still live in,
So there are apartments?
Yes, it's 105 apartments totally, 110 meters, so 34 floors. Very high.
Ναι, έτσι είναι.
On the inside it's not that nice, but it's one of the 14 faculties the University of Buenos Aires has, because actually it's a free university, it's one of the exceptions. It's one of the things and this is a gift from actually it's a designer called Catalano, and it was very, very expensive. It was a gift, he afforded it, and it opens during the day and it closes at night.
Really?
Yes, I saw that in journal about Buenos Aires.
Are there earthquakes here in Argentina?
No, mostly. There is an area next to where the mountains are, which is much more, a little bit more unstable, but it's not very common. How do you call this? Because I didn't know the name.
Just call them sage.
Shade.
Shade.
But
Okay,
I'm not certain.
That's okay. Well, here we are. Actually, Palermo, it's the biggest neighborhood in Buenos Aires. So you have many divisions. You have Old Palermo, which is the area that I told you is close for Córdoba Avenue. You have Barrio Norte, which is all this area. We're approaching Recoleta. Small Palermo. Small Palermo is a place we will see now because it's the exception in terms of urban pattern. We have all the streets here follow the Spanish kind of line, which is quarters with a heart with open air. So if you don't have an apartment that faces the street, which is sometimes very noisy, you have an apartment that faces a green internal air. So you will see the only exception now in a few minutes of curved streets, where all the embassies are located. Also, all mansions of these people that moved north, and after the crack of the 29 couldn't afford them anymore, and they were sold to the different governments.
Sold? What do you mean? For peanuts? Okay. For peanuts.
Okay.
Okay.
Maybe delivered. They given it to.
Yes.
Now they are in use of the different governments. Actually, we will see the Greek embassy. It's amazing.
Greek. Amazing.
It's very impressive because the house was very impressive.
Yeah.
No, have you seen it
No.
already? Well, wait. Maybe you like it. It's very nice. This is small Palermo. We are entering. All this area actually is called Old Palermo, but this small part is called Park Square. Also because the designer was a landscape designer who was this person that created this old open air green park. So, para un segundo. Why this is called this? Because it's like a very exclusive part of Palermo, and this is called Park Square because of Cais. So first of all, I want to show you this house. This house is very plain. It's very French academicism. It's the copy of the house where San Martin lived and died after the Independence War in Granbourg, next to Paris. So he's represented in front. It's the only statue of him not riding his white horse, with his granddaughters, a bit more relaxed.
Yeah.
So
Was he generally a good guy or bloodthirsty and everything? Okay, you cannot tell. Okay, you cannot tell. Okay,
I don't know.
vampire.
You know what? When you are a kid, this is the San Martin Museum. So when you're a kid, you come here and you say the national hero, and suddenly, especially if you study history, you start to know that this were not as they told
So
you.
idealistic.
Yeah. I think they teach you wrong in school, and then you never know, or when you know, you just say, oh, okay. I thought it may be that way, but now I'm sure. Lo hablamos, por favor. I want to show you now another rationalist example of a house of an old woman writer, very important, called Victoria Ocampo. So this was a lot. It has to do with, this is like the house version of the cabana. No ornamentation, nothing, just. So the person that did it was a genius, an architect, and he didn't like this kind of style, but he did it anyway, but he didn't sign it, although Le Corbusier said it was a very nice work. This is the Belgium embassy. What, excuse me?
Belgium.
This one,
of course.
Designed it. But he was into this style, he liked it very much. Well, this is the Belgium embassy. Now, well, in this building used to live, but this is like the Ministry of Economy of the Menem time, who was the president during the 90s. That we have a certain resentment of him. So he actually had to run away. It was very funny.
Yes.
Also, the president had to run away in a helicopter from the big house.
You saw it, huh? Running away
Well, here you
with all the dollars.
With all the dollars, and they sent it abroad. You have the Portugal embassy, but look at the houses of what were the houses, the people that lived in. They are amazing.
Yes.
And the next one is the Greek
Yes.
Son. La Grecia.
It's nice. Long time it's so nice.
Yeah, it's perfect.
It's very nice.
Everything is. If it's Greek, it's nice.
Well, in front you have, this one is not an embassy, but you have an example of British influence in
Yes,
architecture.
yes, yes. Angelina στην λέει την πρεσβεία μας. Γιατί όταν θα μείνουμε...
So, where is Senor Carlos Menem now? Exactly.
He is not-
Davos.
Well, he's between
Switzerland.
Chile. No, he's between Chile because he married a woman from Chile.
What?
enemy.
But she's like really
Gorgeous.
What?
a bitch.
Bitch.
I mean, in a real sense of the way, not a whore because that's morality. I mean, she's a bad person, absolutely. And he's like, they had a baby. But I don't know how because he's like 70 years old and she's like 50. But they invented. I have never seen her with pregnant, but they had a baby. They called him Maximo, not by chance. He always reads about the Roman Republic, about Napoleon.
Oh my
He has
God.
this. Before we pass this used to be an old parking lot, then the Chrysler offices, and now it's a very important loft museum, the department, and the Renault Museum. And this is the Malva, which is a Latin American contemporary art museum, which is a private one. It is very interesting. The private collection is okay. It's nice. That one is one of the malls that I told you that it has an average price. It's called Paseo Alcorta. But I think Florida
the other one?
is better because you have all in one same place. So now I want to show you the parks a little bit. Maybe we can have it's kind of hot, but
What kind of a museum
Kind
did
of
you
hot.
say the loft of what is?
that one is contemporary, modern Latin American, and contemporary and modern Latin American art museum.
Δεν μοιάζει με την παραλιακή.
So, we're talking about Mr. Menem.
Mr. Menem.
Αυτός είναι ο τελευταίος δικτάτορας.
Mr. Menem. Mr.
Πρόεδρος.
Menem.
Αυτός που
I don't like Menem at all. But I
Who
think
likes him?
No, but the thing is, if it weren't Menem, it would have been another one. I mean,
Yeah.
the situation in the world, here it got later, as you had in the UK or in the US, Ronald Reagan and Thatcher. 10 years later, it arrived to Latin America.
Yes.
So Menem didn't have any kind of ethics, and he did what he did, but it would have been another. It's plenty,
Yes,
you know. So
Yeah, but the people, they do not protest about those
well,
gangsters.
actually, it's like everything was all together in the 2001, but Menem was already gone at the time. So that was the moment of the devaluation in the 2001. But it's like people protested all together at that moment after 10 years of one-to-one traveling. But at the same time, the poor people were more. Yes. That's Urquiza. It's a
General.
And it was a landowner, a caudillo, as we say, people that ruled in a province in Buenos Aires. Excuse me, in one of the provinces. Some of them allied with Buenos Aires, some of them against, because that's the difference. Some of them were federalist and some of them were centralist. So all this is the monument that Spanish gave for the but we will see it better when we catch Libertador. But now it's being, everything is on restoration now. I mean, that's the problem.
Yeah, where do they find the money?
This actually has a very sad story because it sank. This came by boat and it sank twice.
Nice.
So it's very interesting the monument because it's Art Nouveau, it's very ornamented, and in the back part, in the the basement, there are 4 Argentinian regions represented, but we can see them because of the thing.
The guys who were in charge in 2001 are now also in
No.
charge. No.
They were the current president that flew away from the thing house. Sorry. Do you want us to go down to see the Rose Garden and I'll pick us up on the other
Yes.
side?
Nice.
You would like? You can say hot.
Επειδή έχει και νερό εκεί.
Ναι. Νερό, κρύο. Ρε, τι ωραία είναι εδώ. Φίλε, θα τα πάρουμε όλα.
Γεια και φεύγουμε.
Πώς το ρουφάς έτσι ρε παιδί?
Ana casi. Have you been already through Avenue Alvear? Yeah? No? No, it's fine, I'm fine, thank you. I still have a...
Τώρα πρέπει να της δώσουμε τις κοπέλες να γεμίσουμε το δικό της.
Πού είναι το πασχαμένο?
Κι άλλο. Θα το πελάμε.
Έτσι το πίσω όλο, κάνει το μόνο, εγώ δεν έχω πρόβλημα.
Ωραία πόλη είναι πάντως. Δεν είναι μαλακίες τώρα έτσι. Πολύ ωραία κτίρια, είναι φαντά. Είναι το Παρίσι της Νοτιού Αμερικής είναι εδώ πέρα. Τελείως. Μπουφ, την έκανες τη βλαγία,
Έλα, εδώ ξεπλύνουμε στο ποταμάκι.
Βλαγία μας, την έκανες.
Δεν την κάναμε.
Ήτανε από εκείνο. Mixed green.
Ήτανε συνεργασία.
Πάρα στα αυτά.
Ποια είναι αυτά? We can go right here to see the Andalusian patio. From Andalusia. Actually,
When this was
well,
constructed?
this was from the 1890s, 1900s.
1890s. Oh, pretty
Yes,
old.
actually, when they started to do the redesign of the urban pattern, actually it was open in the 1900s, but the idea is that they started building and redesigning all the old 3rd of February Park, which was this whole area, into different spaces. And what ties this was a mixture of the French geometrical garden, in which you have a glance in one place and you have a view of the whole park, with the British more intimacy and you know. So he mixed that idea, those ideas together, and also brought trees and seed them all together from all over the world. Again. So and also he always put an artificial lake, as you may see here, that it is clean because it has an artificial system of cleaning the water, so you can still catch a boat and go around the lake, which is pretty boring, but
Catch a boat.
a boat.
Yes?
Yeah, so you do you drink the water in your house from the faucet or you always buy
I
bottles?
don't, but because it has a lot of chlorus.
From the hotel we can drink? Yes. No,
I mean, it doesn't. Anything. I mean, you won't get intoxicated as in Mexico, for instance. But if you have mineral water, it's better.
I see. Ωραία να φορτώσουμε νερά, Α, κοίτα. Andalusian
This was a gift.
from the Spaniards.
From the Andalusia community.
Córdoba? Who knows?
Actually, it was a gift from the government, but mostly from Andalusia, because Andalusia is not that wealthy. It's an area, but
El patio andaluz.
it has to do with immigration, because here mostly immigrants were Italians and Spaniards.
Spaniards.
Then you have Russian, Arabs, French.
Most were Spaniards or Italians?
Half and half.
Half and half.
Usually people have half of Italian origin and half Spanish origin. That's the most typical Argentinian you will find. Half and half.
Sevilla.
Ofrece esta muestra de la industria de trabajo
Γράφει patio.
espiritual. Πάμε.
Interrupted for the First World War. But when an immigrant arrived, many of them they just came to work in the harvest time and then maybe try to get back to their countries. Many of them couldn't do it. So when they got a piece of land to buy a small house, they always seeded a palm tree in the front as an omen that if the palm tree grew, they would do well in Argentina. So there it comes what we say sometimes, I just stayed in the palm tree because they didn't grow. They didn't grow more than that. That's the idea. Yes. That's why, because some people say this is a tropical country where you have so many countries. Sì, però sai che ora per the tropical
Iguazú.
Iguazú Falls.
Μας δείτε να πεθάνουμε στο Iguazú. Βέβαια.
Άμα έχει υγρασία και 30.
Όχι, άμα σίγουρα έχει υγρασία. 30 να έχει, τελειώσαμε. 50.
It's the same latitude than Australia.
22. Ωραία, ωραία.
Είναι πολύ πιο ψηλά από την Ελλάδα. 22 είναι.
Ποιο?
Who were a former branch of the Franciscan order. So that's why the neighborhood took its name. And first of all, you have the church. The cemetery didn't exist, it was the farm of this church. And this open air place that you see today where people came during the weekends from Central Square to have a good time on the weekends. But at a certain point, the population started to grow and this was included in the city.
Αυτό μαλώσατε.
Pueden usar, están listos para pasar mate.
10 pesos tú traes το μάτι.
10 pesos.
Καλή είναι η τιμή πάντως άμα θέλεις.
It's not so nice this square, like San Martin. San Martin is nicer,
Okay, San Martin people usually say that it's the nicest town.
Nice.
I think it may be true, yes.
It's not so.
It's much more impressive, the cliff. At night I was walking, because I was walking through Florida, like 10:30, you had the Englishman Tower with light and it's amazing.
Nice.
Here at night,
It's okay.
So, there you go.
Αυτό θα γεμίσει.
over, we're over.
Pingüinos. ¡Dale, pingüino! Pingüino.
Φέρτε τώρα ένα παγετό.
Παγετώνα, παγετώνα. Πάρε το πουρό εδώ. Πάρε το πουρό. Πάρε το πουρό. Πώς θα είναι η Φλωρέντσα σε 10 χρόνια.
Από τα στενά. Αν και δεν έχει καλή υπερβάσεις.
Όχι, όχι, όχι.
Είναι πολύ...
Κάνει όμως, πηγαίνει σε τίποτα σπα, καταλαβαίνεις τι έγινε εκεί τώρα.
Καλά, σίγουρα.
Άμα δεν πηγαίνει αυτή, πού θα πηγαίνει?
Έλατε εμείς.
Άμα πηγαίνει η κόρη της δαμέ 4 μήνες διακοπές στις Ηνωμένες Πολιτείες κιόλας.
Σε κανένα άσπενο εγώ,
Άντε γάμισε.
Βέιλ, Βέιλ.
Άχα, Βέιλ.
Λοιπόν, ωραίο μαγαζί.
Παίρνεις το λαμπάκι.
Concept of urban design that existed in the 20th century and didn't exist before. So the south, you will see that there are no so many parks in the south, no so many trees, yes, because the south just happened. History made it happen and not design. That's the main difference from the aesthetical point of view. Then we are going to talk a little bit about history. The south also is important because the two foundations of the city took place in the south. Yeah, the city started there. We are going to visit the two probable spots of the foundations of Buenos Aires. They were asking me just now about the name of the city. Why is Buenos Aires called like that? You know that Buenos Aires means literally good air or good airs, yeah? And that is about the winds mainly, good winds, because Buenos Aires was a virgin, Santa Maria de los Buenos Aires, Saint Mary of the Good Airs. It was a Spanish Catholic virgin that the conquerors who came from Spain brought with them in the ships, because she was the protector of navigators, of the good winds for navigation. So when they came and they settled in the second foundation of the city, they gave this name to the city because of the Virgin. We say that the southern area is the poorest today. It used to be the other way round, yes? When the wealthy families lived in the south, they lived mainly in the area of San Telmo. We are going to see some of the original houses today. They used to have their weekend houses or summer houses even further south, in Barracas. Today we will see that Barracas is like a dead area because it was very important for the elite families, and then it became an industrial area when the families moved to the north. Now most of these industries are stopped, yeah? So you will see big factories and that are like dead because of the different economic crises that the country went through, that the industries started to close, yes. The last one was in 2001, yeah, 3 years ago. But this started to happen in the 70s already, during the last military dictatorship in Argentina. La vuelta a la plaza algo y vamos agarramos Balcarce después. Well, here we are in the main square again. Plaza de Mayo, exactly.
Florence,
Yes.
you didn't notice yesterday that I didn't notice that just half of this building is painted rose,
Yeah.
and the other half is.
It's true. They
brown.
always paint the front. They repaint the front, and they don't repaint the whole building that is like a very old pink, yes? We don't know exactly the reason. There are many jokes that always say that the budget is not enough for painting the whole building and they just paint the entrance, yes. And in a way, it must be something like that, because if not, it's very crazy to just to paint the front of the house because it is seen from the park.
Maybe we could paint the front this year, the one side next.
Yeah, next year, and they, like that, they take turns.
Who is Carolino? Mayor? Carolino? Carolino?
That is a problem in the syndicates, you know, in the different workers' associations that the police has killed two in the past 2 years, and they are always like doing demonstrations and asking for the clarification of those murders. And that's the name of one. You know, there's always something taking place here in the square. A demonstration against or for, or almost every day.
But it seems quiet, no much.
No, these are like short demonstrations, and they are like small groups of people. There's no travel. When there's a lot of people in something like bigger, sometimes there's travel, but not so often today. Things are quite calm in the country compared to the last 3 or 4 years. Well, now we'll turn right, and this will be our first step in the south of the city already. This neighborhood here, mainly San Telmo, that is what we are going to visit, it's in the south of the city, but it's part of downtown also. It's very, very close to the square, and so it's part of the urban life. Then when we go to Barracas, you will see that lifestyle changed completely. It's very similar to the outskirts of the city already, although it is geographically inside the city. This is already San Telmo. San Telmo is very important when we talk about immigration. You know that during this economic boom that Argentina went through at the end of the 19th century, many immigrants came from different parts of Europe to work the land. And the area of San Telmo, that was where all the wealthy families lived, was the problematic area because of all the sanitary problems that started with immigration. You know, these people were supposed to come through the port that was in the south and then go to the countryside to start working the land. But in many cases, they went to the countryside and they couldn't find a piece of land to work because the lands were very quickly distributed, so they had to come back to the city, although that was not their original intention, and stay in the city working, doing whatever they could, looking for a job. That's when overpopulation starts in Buenos Aires, and all the epidemics like cholera and yellow fever, and the many, many sanitary problems. And this was all concentrated in San Telmo. The city was very, very small by those times. And what they've done in the past years was they recreated a little bit the atmosphere of the beginning of the century. For example, all this stone pavement in the street, it was all destroyed, and they fixed it up a little bit. This is an area that is full of tango places, yes, tango bars, San Telmo, yeah. Because tango belongs to the south of the city, not to the north. Yeah? Tango was born at the end of the 19th century when the south was still the center of the city. Today, San Telmo is a very bohemian area. Many artists live here. They have their ateliers and their workshops. Young people mainly. But there's always a contradiction, because you will see that some buildings are really destroyed and not well kept. The government of the city keeps on putting money in the north that has already more money, and not in the south that really needs more money because it's older. But that always works like that, yes. Places who have money get more money. The street that comes across, that is Chile, is very active at night. There are many pubs and bars and restaurants. Quite nice at night.
Is it safe? Is it safe?
Yes, this area of San Telmo is safe. Perhaps if you start walking that way at night, it can get a little bit dangerous. La Boca, yeah. But here there's no problem.
And there are milongas here?
Yes.
Milonga?
A lot. Milongas and tango bars and tango lessons. It's very tangy area, San Telmo. To go to tango? It depends. What you want, a show or a milonga?
No, milonga.
Well, there's one that is great that is called La Ideal. Then I will write it down
Ideal.
for you. That is
Here?
in downtown, in Suipacha Street.
Okay.
Well, this big building that you have, now it's hidden behind the trees. Then you will see it again. It's an enormous building with like a neoclassical front. Can you see
Yes.
it? Yes. Well, that's today the School of Engineering of the Buenos Aires University. But it used to be Evita Perón's foundation. Do you know about Evita?
No.
Yeah?
No, no.
Well, I will tell you.
You tell us all the story, all the
Evita
politics.
Perón was the wife of President Perón, yes, that was president in the country from 45 till 55, and then he came back in the 70s for a third period of his presidency. And Evita was Perón's wife, yeah? She was very, a woman from a very humble origin. Sorry, I interrupt the story to show you this and then I continue. These two buildings on your left, that are the twin buildings, are the secretaries of Agriculture and Cattle Ranch, always so important for the economy of Argentina. Sigamos por acá y paremos en la iglesia de San. Well, so Evita was this very humble actress. She was a cabaret actress, actually, from a very poor family, and she met Perón when Perón was about to, he wasn't president, but he was about to be, yes, he was a very important military man, and he fell completely in love with her, and they got married and everything. And when Perón was president, Evita was a sort of vice president. She was always working with him, and she worked mainly for the poor people, because that was her class, yes, her original class. And she had a foundation that was in that building before it was the Evita Perón Foundation, and she worked for poor people and for workers, opening hospitals, schools in the poor provinces of the country. She did a great job for poor people. But at the same time, Perón and his government were accused of being right-wing and of being a dictator, yes. And in fact, he was a dictator. The country was under a dictatorship. They controlled all the media, all the press. But at the same time, they did a good job for the people. Yes, it was very contradictory. On your right hand, this brick building is a church, and it's a Danish Lutheran church. This is one of the tracks of immigration that you will find in San Telmo. When you find something like this, like a Danish church or a Russian church, it doesn't mean that this is a Russian or a Danish neighborhood, because all the immigrants were mixed here. This was a political decision, yes? The government decided that they wouldn't create ghettos. Exactly. That, for example, in the States, that you have the Italian,
Latin quarter,
the Latin, and with all the restaurants and everything. Here, this was all mixed up because it was a policy, yes, not by chance. Sigamos, Aldo. And San Telmo is the place where all these immigrants finally stayed. So you will see all this mixture of immigration tracks here in San Telmo. Well, so a little bit more about Evita. This was a very complex phenomenon, yes, Peronism, and still is in the country. In a way, the country is still divided between Peronists and anti-Peronists. These feelings were very radical, yes. If you were a Peronist or if you belonged to a Peronist family, it was really, really radical. And the opposite thing also. In general, the anti-Peronists were wealthy families. Yes.
Anti-Peronists?
Anti-Peronists.
Wealthy families.
Wealthy families. And the Peronist was supported by the world in 52. To create the myth, you know, being young, beautiful, poor, ex-actress, and the wife of a politician.
Yes.
All the elements that created the myth.
Yes.
Yeah? Okay, we're going down colonial too, and it's in the north. Only one exception. This is the church from the late colonial period. And it gives the name to the whole neighborhood. This is the church of Saint Peter Delmo, San Pedro Delmo. That's why the whole area is called San Telmo.
San Telmo.
This saint, yes. San Telmo is like the male version of the Virgin of Buenos Aires, because this saint, San Telmo, was also a protector for navigators. When conquerors came from Spain, they always brought a figure of Saint Pedro Telmo and a figure of La Virgen de los Buenos Aires for protection. And whenever they arrived safely to a coast, they built a temple for the saint. Yeah, and we have San Telmo over there. It's the figure in the middle. You see the dark figure. He always carries a ship in one of his hands. This church was built by the Jesuits, like most of the colonial churches in Buenos Aires. And the Jesuits used to live next door in the big. There's a big house there. Now we will see. That was the Jesuits' residence originally. And most of the material was brought from Europe. You have to think that Buenos Aires was a very poor area from all points of view. No mineral resources, yes, no construction material. We don't have stone, we don't have minerals, we don't have silver, yeah. So most of the material was all brought from Europe when they started the first construction in ships. Incredible. All the mosaics, for example, you see all the blue mosaics were all brought from Portugal, yes. This is like a Portuguese colonial construction, actually. And most of these churches, the colonial churches, were done with this idea. The external appearance was very attractive because they had to conquer the people who were living here. But the insides are very humble and very simple because they had to make them feel like home and to feel comfortable in a church.
Clever.
So they all have this dichotomy, yes? External appearance very attractive and very simple in the insides. Stores. And there's a very big antique market every Sunday in the whole square. The square, that is called Dorrego Square, used to be what we call a hole. The old city, the colonial city, had some holes that were these squares with no trees that were for parking horses. They were the parking area for the horses. And some of them have stayed like this one, yes? And it's the heart of San Telmo. In the weekends they close the street. There are no cars and it's pedestrian. Many artists and tango dancers in the street. That is Saturday and Sunday. And on Sundays the flea market. And then you have this bar in the corner that is very traditional, the Dorrego bar. It's the oldest in San Telmo, yes? You know that in Buenos Aires, the culture of the cafe and the culture of the bar is very, very important. If you walk around in the north or in the south of the city and you start counting how many bars you have per block, yes, you will discover how important this is for the porteño culture. The social life, for example, takes place in bars. Social life, political discussions, romances. When you're at university studying, it's very typical to go to a bar and stay for 4 or 5 hours reading with just one coffee, and there's no problem. Yes, it's very typical from this culture. And this one is the oldest in San Telmo. It's more than 100 years old, and it's where tango was sung at the beginning of the century, popularly, yes, like tango singers used to meet here and sing in the bar like a jam session, and everything. And the house is a typical Italian house from the 19th century with the balconies and the narrow doors and everything. We will walk a little bit across the street.
Εδώ είναι ωραία.
Τόσο πολύ σαν την κερί εδώ και...
Χαμός.
Και ωραία περιοχή.
Πολύ ωραία.